as though the world is changing so fast that you're struggling to keep up? Do you feel that the lines between home and work are blurring and you're struggling to kind of keep a divide between the two? As a professional, are you finding that adapting to this new hybrid world of work is requiring you to learn new skills, to adapt, to adjust? If you answered yes to any of those, well, you're definitely not alone, because professionals the world over are going through this very same struggle. In fact, this struggle has been extremely stressful on professionals the world over. In fact, 2020 was listed as the most stressful year of most professionals' lives. And the reason for that is because essentially the paradigm of work is making a dramatic shift, a significant shift. The old paradigm, pre-pandemic, was one where we were largely doing face-to-face interpersonal communication, interpersonal work, working together in person. Now, the new paradigm is going to be a hybrid. It's going to be that face-to-face, but also connected with working with remote teams, remote clients, remote colleagues. And that's going to require a whole new set of skills. And it's also going to require all of us to adapt to this. And the other thing to keep in mind as we shift to this new paradigm is it's going to play a significant amount of wear and tear on our bodies as well, because sitting in front of a computer, interacting with people in a remote type environment is going to require us to do much more computer work, which can cause a lot of fatigue. And when we're fatigued, we're often less productive. So let me tell you a little bit about myself so you can understand where I'm coming from. My name is John Godoy. I am a professional speaker, and I'm in the health and wellness field for 20 years. And during that time, I've brought a product to market from literally conception in a garage to crowdfunding it, to manufacturing it, to selling it online and in over 100 different countries. And in that process, I've learned so much about working with remote teams, remote colleagues, or remote counterparts all over the world. As a professional speaker, I did largely in-person presentations, seminars, workshops, but when the pandemic hit and we shifted to this new hybrid model, well, we've had to learn and adapt how to communicate effectively, just as powerfully online as well, okay? And I'm going to be combining those two experiences, being in the health and wellness and entrepreneurial industry for 20 years, as well as my professional speaking, communication skills, and training background to provide you some valuable tools that will help you navigate through these challenging times. Now, there's essentially three things that you need to adapt. Number one is you're going to need hybrid skills. Hybrid skills are skills that are uniquely specific to this new hybrid world of work, where you're going to be working with in-person teams and remote teams as well. It's essentially learning some of the strategies on how to take what you already know how to do in person and apply it in a virtual world, in a virtual environment. The second is personal well-being. And this is something that we've all kind of, as a society, as a group, come to realize the significant importance of physical and mental well-being, because we've all become exhausted, we're all been isolated, we're all struggling with so many of the negative effects of the pandemic. And therefore, taking care of our personal wellness is going to be a significant component of effective work and effective success in the hybrid world. And then lastly, it's going to learn how to successfully and effectively communicate well with people who are remote. Maybe you're a manager, maybe you have teams that are remote, and you need to be able to get them to listen to everything that you're trying to get them to learn, get them to be able to communicate with other teams, or perhaps get them to interact with their clients. All these require specific skills. And today I'm going to share with you how to do that. So today I'm going to share with you 4 tools. And the first one is how to build a healthy home office. And a healthy home office will allow you to be productive and effective while away from the office. Now, the tools that I share with you here will also be applicable if you have a regular office, because you can use it just as effectively there. But this is fundamentally the most important thing, to create an environment to support the hybrid work, whether you're doing it or your employees are doing it. The next thing I'm going to share with you is how to reduce Zoom fatigue, because you're going to be looking at computer screens much more than you did prior to the pandemic. And in this new hybrid world, remote meetings, remote communication is going to be so important. And we got to realize that we just can't stare at a screen and watch people's heads talk all the time. It's just going to be too exhausting, too draining. I'm going to share with you how to create better online meetings, right? One of the biggest pet peeves that employees have is too many meetings online, too many boring meetings, too many poorly done meetings, too many poorly done presentations during meetings. And this drives everyone crazy, and it leads to apathy, and it leads to people not wanting to be involved with the company because it's just fatiguing on them. And the last one, I'm going to share with you how to present better online. When we are in person and we communicate, we give presentations, we conduct meetings, people can see our body language, right? There's a lot of nuance in communication in body language, but online that disappears, right? We really just have our facial expressions and perhaps our words, our screens to help get sorry, I shouldn't say our screens, our PowerPoints, our presentations to help get our message across. But if we don't know how to use them effectively, we lose so much of our ability to get our message across, okay? So let's start with the first topic, and that's going to be how to create a healthy home office, right? How to create a healthy home office. Now, there's two things I'd like you to think about when it comes to this, right? Two principles, two fundamental ideas around which this whole concept of healthy home office is built. The first one is based around the saying that first we shape our environment, and then our environment shapes us. I'll say that again. First, we shape our environment, and then our environment shapes us. This basically tells us that, the environment that we put ourselves in can significantly affect the behaviors that we want to embrace. So imagine if you're sitting and working in a very dark room, or you're sitting at your kitchen table trying to do work. It's not ideally conducive to work, right? And so you're going to lose your effectiveness to do work. And now that hybrid work is going to be here to stay, it behooves you to create an environment, right, that helps you work much more effectively. And that's why the environment that you built, the built environment will help support the behaviors that you want. Now, the second thing I want you to think about is the notion that every day we only have a finite amount of willpower, to essentially take care of our health, look after ourselves, right? And in the very morning when you wake up, you have that cup of willpower, and you can apply it to the stuff that you have to do at home. Maybe you're homeschooling your children, maybe you have to apply it to work, but you only have a finite amount of willpower in a given day. And so that's why creating an environment will help support the finite amount of willpower that you have, because the environment will make it easier for you to embrace the behaviors that will help you stay a little bit healthier and will help you be more effective in a hybrid work environment. So I'll give you an example. Let's start with the first one. These are the 8 things I want you to really kind of think about. Usually I don't put a lot of information on a slide, but today I put all this information here because I want you to essentially take a screenshot of this, or to look at this as a checklist of tools that you should consider getting that will enhance your ability to do work in a hybrid setting, okay? So the first thing we're going to touch on is getting a standing desk, right? A standing desk or an adjustable height platform desk. And the reason behind this is because the human body was not designed to sit for prolonged periods of time. It was actually designed to be physically moving, right? During the 9 years that I was an entrepreneur and brought a physical product to market, the product was essentially an exercise device for office workers to use at their desk. All we did is we studied the effectiveness of, we studied the negative effects of prolonged bouts of sitting. We studied it, and what we came up with, obviously, is that sitting for prolonged periods of time is bad for you. But the conventional wisdom was, well, then what do? Well, you stand. Well, standing isn't good for you either, because if you think about people who stand for a living, they're told that prolonged bouts of standing is not good for them either. So they're told to sit. So what's the solution? Movement. But movement isn't really practical in a modern world of work where most of us spend so much time sitting. So the solution is a balance between sitting, standing, and movement. And that's where a standing desk comes into place, or an adjustable height station comes into place. It allows you to adjust your position so your body's a little bit more healthy, or has a little bit more energy, and so you're much more effective when you're working. So that's the first step. The second step is to position your desk next to a window, right? Ideally a window that has natural light And there's two reasons for this. One is from a health perspective, and one is from a communication, a hybrid communication perspective. From the health perspective, this is a great idea because if you place your desk right next to the window, you get the natural light coming in, the vitamin D, your mood will be uplifted, you'll feel so much better. You'll be more productive. From a communication perspective, as I was telling you earlier, in a remote setting, when we're communicating, most people, they're just sitting down, they're looking at the camera, or maybe they're looking at their keyboard, and this is all you see when they're communicating with you. And so much of the nuance of their message that you would see if they were in person is completely lost because you can't see their body, right? So in the absence of being able to see their body and their physical movements and their physical gestures, we need to be able to see the facial expressions on them, right? And natural lighting coming in will enhance their facial expressions. It'll enhance your facial expressions, so you'll be better able to connect with the people that you're speaking with, whether they're colleagues, clients, or people that work for you. And that's the importance of having good lighting that can come from a well-lit window. And so that's the second strategy. Place your desk next to a window. The third is to get a compression mat to stand on when you're working, when you're doing standing work. And the reason behind this is because when you stand, right, there's a lot of pressure put on the joints of your body, in particular your knees and your back, right? So if you are standing, this compression pad is underneath you, it will reduce the effects of gravity and pressure on your joints, and you'll be much more fresher to do your work. The next strategy is to get a cooking timer and set your timer for 45-minute breaks, right? Every 45 minutes you work, and then 15 minutes you take a break. Oftentimes, we don't think about the importance of physical movement, physical activity to keep ourselves healthy during the workday. And we don't necessarily remind ourselves that it's important to get up and move, to take a break. That improves productivity, right? A cooking timer will allow you to do that. Just set it for 45 minutes of work, 15 minutes of break. Next, number 5, use a blue light blocker for your screen. So essentially when you're doing work on a computer, you're always kind of just staring at what amounts to a flashlight right back at you. It's not exactly the same as a flashlight, but it's almost like it. So you're staring at it and it's putting exhaustion in your eyes, right? Many of you probably at the end of a workday or after staring at a computer for a long period of time, you probably put your hands on your eyes and you kind of rub them like that. It's exhausting. It's really challenging on your eyes. And a very powerful way to reduce the effect of eye strain is use a blue light blocker. You can get a blue light blocker glasses or a blue light blocker app. Okay. The next step, then I would challenge you, is to get a ergonomic chair and a stability ball. And they both serve as tools that will help you, they'll help you, stay more awake while the periods of time that you're sitting. Now, a stability ball is good because it allows you a little bit of movement, but it's not enough to keep you essentially healthy while you're sitting, because when you're sitting on a stability ball, your spine needs to be straight. And just like any other muscles in your body, the spine has muscles around it. And when you're using it, the muscles are getting tired and tired and tired, and the spine begins to bend. And when the spine begins to bend, it just puts a lot of pressure on it, right? And that's why a stability ball is good for short periods of time to give your body a little bit of a break, but then switch back and forth between a nice office chair. Okay. The next strategy is to get a water bottle and keep it next to your desk. And if you keep a water bottle next to your desk, you're much more likely to drink from it. And there's actually a lot of research behind this. One of the biggest struggles that a lot of professionals have who sit for long periods of time, especially when they're working at a computer, is that they get dehydrated, right? And just simply getting up and going to get more water isn't always practical, nor do you always have the willpower to remind yourself to go and get it. Simply having the bottle close by will help you. There's actually research behind it, as I mentioned earlier. There's a gentleman by the name of Brian Wansink, and he is a behavior and nutrition scientist at Cornell University in the United States. And he wanted to find a way to get people to drink more water. And what he did is he conducted research at the United States Military Academy, where he took 2 groups. One group sat down in the middle of the lunchroom, and they were sitting at their desks. And anytime they wanted to get up and anytime they wanted more water, they would have to get up, walk to the side of the room, fill up the water, and then come back, right? They only drank so much water because it takes effort. The other group, they sat at their tables and then they had cups, but then somebody would walk around and just constantly be filling up their cups without them really thinking about it. So their water would always be replenished. And that simple change in having water easily accessible increased the amount of water consumption that they had by 40%. And so that's the power of always having bottles of water readily accessible. The last strategy to think about is to use a wireless headset when you are working, right? Wireless headset when you're working on Zoom, when you're having Zoom meetings. And the reason behind this is, ironically, it actually boosts creativity. Research at Stanford University found that a person, when they are walking, they're actually 60% more creative than they are when they are sitting, right? So we're going to interpret creativity as they think a little bit better. They can think a little bit more out of the box. And when you're on important phone calls, you're having meetings with people, it's just so critical to be able to think well on your feet. So use that same advantage by having that headset. And then when you're having a crucial conversation with somebody, a difficult conversation, or maybe you're having a brainstorming session, just stand up, move around, and your productivity or your creativity can increase up to 60%. It's also really good for your health, right? Because you're not sitting all day long. It gives you a break from your sitting, creates good movement, burns a little bit of energies, keep you healthy, okay? So these are just 8 simple strategies that you can use to create a home office that is much healthier and much more conducive to hybrid work. And the reason why we covered this first is because this is essentially the foundation, right? You have to create the right environment to do optimal work. The next thing we're going to cover is Zoom fatigue. Now, Zoom fatigue is a big problem. We can call it Microsoft Teams fatigues, or any of the other video conferencing technologies fatigues. And it just comes from hour after hour of countless video meetings and video presentations, webinars, video calls, whatever they might be. So here are 4 strategies to reduce that fatigue. This is from research conducted at Stanford University Virtual Human Interaction Lab. So this isn't stuff coming from me. This is actual research from Stanford University, okay? So the first strategy is to reduce the size of the video on your screen. So a good portion of people, when they're sitting at a laptop or a desktop, what they'll do is they'll fill the whole screen with the entire video, whether it's somebody else or it's a YouTube video or it's a presentation, and that's exhausting to the eyes. So a simple strategy is just to reduce the size of that screen. Second is to get rid of your own picture. Oftentimes when we look at ourselves, especially we look at the Zoom screen, we're on a call, we not only see the person that we're speaking with, but we also see ourselves as well, right? And seeing ourselves can be a very big distraction to us, right? And that can cause fatigue. So the second strategy is just to use that little box in the up right corner and get rid of that second picture of you, or that other picture of you. You don't need to see yourself, you just need to see the other people, right? The next strategy is kind of very similar to what we covered in the healthy home office. Create a adjustable height desk or standing desk, because this will allow you to stand when you're on meetings, right? I'm standing, if I was a little bit closer, right, I could probably pass myself off as sitting. And oftentimes people sit because they just think that's normal. That's how everybody else is on a Zoom meeting. But it doesn't have to be the case. I would challenge you to stand. If you can, turn off your screen and just pace, move around. Use Zoom meetings where you don't need to physically be on screen. You're not the one physically talking, as an opportunity to stand, get some more movement. It'll actually help you be more productive in that actual meeting itself. And then the last strategy is just simply to turn off the video, turn away from the screen, get rid of that external visual stimuli, and just listen to the presentation or listen to whatever is being transpired during the meeting. Because one of the things that we've all learned about meetings is oftentimes we don't need to be there, but somebody invited us and we had to go in there for whatever reason. And there's no need for us to stare at the screen the entire time. We can just turn our head away, listen, and it just becomes a simple way to reduce the negative effects of Zoom. We're going to jump into the next thing, which is how to have better remote meetings. How to have better remote meetings. Now, recently, I conducted a workshop for a biotechnology company. It was a product management team of a biotechnology company. And their whole team, because of the pandemic, has gone remote. So they're in all parts of the United States. And this workshop was designed to give them tools on how to communicate more effectively online. And at the beginning of every workshop, what I do is I contact all the participants and I ask them, what is it that you like to learn? Or what are the biggest challenges that you have with virtual communication? And without one person, how can I say, without fail, each and every person that I asked from this biotechnology company said that the biggest pet peeve that they had about virtual remote work was too many meetings, was the virtual meetings, because they were terrible. They were just a drain on time, drain on effectiveness, and drain on health, right? So here are 5 strategies that you can use to have better remote meetings, especially if you're the boss of a team. You do these things, your team is going to be so much more grateful to you. They're going to be so grateful to you, and they'll actually be more effective, okay? The first strategy is to avoid stacking meetings. And maybe all of you have kind of experienced this, where you'll start a meeting at 9 o'clock, and then right after, the next one starts at 9:30, 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11, back to back to back to back. And you don't get a time to just decompress, mentally shift from one meeting where you kind of hop into the next one, and your stress level is high because you're just trying to catch up. The feedback that I got from the people from this biotech company was exactly the same. It just caused an elevated amount of stress, just jumping from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. And this was news to their managers, because the managers had no idea that this was causing stress. They just thought they were being more productive by stacking all these meetings back to back to back, when in reality, the opposite was happening. So I would challenge you to put 5-minute buffers, either at the beginning of the meeting or at the end of your meeting. So instead of having 30-minute meetings, you have 25. Right? And it starts 5 minutes after the hour, and it finishes 5 minutes prior to the next session. And the reason behind that is it's just going to allow your people to downshift and then upshift right into the meeting that you're about to start. Okay. The next one is to limit the size of your group. Limit the size of your group. And this was another big pet peeve of a lot of the people for example, from this product management team. They felt that, what managers had done is they had just, because everything went online, they replaced emails, face-to-face meetings, face-to-face boardroom meetings, all with just online meetings. Everything kind of got jumbled together into online meetings, and everybody just kept getting invited. And more often than not, they thought, you know what? I didn't need to be there. Why was I there? It was just a waste of time, but they never spoke up, right? The managers didn't know. So this brings into to focus the concept of synchronous versus asynchronous communication, right? Synchronous is kind of like what we're doing right now, where all of you are on right now and I'm speaking, we're all here at the same time. This is being recorded, and so for those people who couldn't make it today, they can look at this recording later asynchronously at their own time. They can fast forward it, or maybe they realize, you know what, I signed up for it, but I really didn't want to go see it. They don't have to see it. They have that choice, right? A powerful way to start having meetings is just to really ask yourself, who really needs to be here? Just invite those people, and the people who really don't, take them off the list. And the people who are kind of in that gray zone, well, give them the recording. Always record your meetings so that they can go back and look at the meetings asynchronously at their own leisure. Okay? Kind of like a YouTube video. We watch that not live often, but we watch them asynchronously. Okay? That's the second strategy. Next, provide better visuals. Provide better slides, better visuals. When we have virtual meetings, oftentimes when people put slides up on their screen, they're atrocious. They can have way too much data on them, right? So they put up a slide and it's like statistics here, numbers here, projections here, and they only keep the slides up for 15, 20, 30 seconds. And then whoever they're presenting it to, well, the moment that slide comes on, they look at it, this is the first time they're seeing it. They have no idea where their eyes should go. And so they're trying to listen to the presenter or the leader or the boss speak. They're trying to sort out what they're supposed to look at. And the slide design is such that it's not very appealing. It's not very obvious what the individual is supposed to look at. And this can cause a lot of confusion and frustration. Something to really remember is that most people are visual learners, right? We're not auditory learners. And so when you're just relying on your words to try to get someone to understand what you're saying, you're really not connecting to how most people learn. People are going to learn from the visuals. So instead of using your slides as an afterthought, become very strategic in how you put information on the screen, the visual appealingness, how you can use the visuals of your slide to help influence people's perception or understanding of the verbal message you're trying to give. So that's the third strategy, is to provide better visuals. And a great book to purchase is called Slideology, SLIDE period OLOGY. Slideology is a powerful book by one of the top presentation design firms in Silicon Valley that'll give you some ideas on how to make better visuals. Next, make meetings intentional, right? Make meetings intentional. Now, this was another big pet peeve of a lot of these product managers. And this was that they'd go to a meeting and the meeting was kind of planned. It wasn't really well planned. And so they just sat there while different people spoke, and they spoke 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and they would go on tangents. They'd go off track, and people just got frustrated because there's an opportunity cost to every meeting, right? Opportunity cost is what you could have been using that time for otherwise, right? So it's the importance, is the message, I guess the point is to become more intentional with your meeting. And you do that by creating an agenda. Now, if any of you have ever been to a Toastmasters meeting, which is a great public speaking training company or organization, they are very, very diligent in creating agendas which they stick to. And I would challenge you to do this too with your own organizations. Create an agenda of what is supposed to happen in a meeting, right? Just say for the first 5 minutes, right? It's that buffer. People can kind of banter, get to know each other, ask how each other is doing, right? That's how you check up on the well-being of your people. And then next you have, key announcements for 5 minutes. And then you have after that, a list of who speaks next on what topic. And then you also want to include someone who's very, very diligent on keeping time. So when one person in the meeting is allocated to speak, they only have 5 minutes. Allow a little bit larger of a window for a discussion period, but really focus on sticking to those times. This will do two things. One, it'll make sure your meetings finish on time, but it'll also ensure that your people learn how to make their ideas and get their message across in a much more succinct fashion, right? Oftentimes people are just so verbose, and it's just, you can't listen to them keep talking and talking and talking and talking, but they have no idea. And they have no idea time is just going on infinitum, right? Give them a strict deadline and say, we're going to cut you off, and they will adjust to it. So that's what I mean by make meetings intentional. The last thing I'm going to cover is the last strategy is to be mindful of cognitive and physical fatigue. And this is why all of this virtual stuff is interconnected with physical and mental well-being, right? Why we designed a healthy home office. Because oftentimes when we think about productivity, we think about, well, what skills can I develop? What tools can I get? We don't look back at the fundamental driver of all of this effectiveness, of all productivity, which is physical and mental energy. And that is constantly dwindling. From the moment you wake up to the point you go to bed at the night, your energy is going down, 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 and your productivity and your effectiveness will naturally go down. So two things to avoid. Number one, to remember, I should say, okay? Physically, the person is exhausted. The person is probably exhausted from sitting down all day long, working at a desk, taking care of everything that they have to in their life, right? And so when they're exhausted, they're going to have a very difficult time paying attention to you. The second thing is what's called cognitive load. Cognitive load essentially means every individual can only handle so much information at one time, right? If it is difficult to understand you when you're conducting a virtual meeting, if you are going on too many tangents, if your virtual slides are just atrocious and it's very difficult to understand what you're trying to say, right? If you're having meeting after meeting after meeting, infinitum, eventually the person's brain is going to shut off and say, I can't listen to this anymore. And they're going to stop listening to you. And then the meeting is basically moot. It's no longer relevant anymore. When people's brain and body shut down, it's moot. So these are things to always keep in mind. So the tool behind that is just to keep meetings short, keep them have less of them. Okay. So these are 5 strategies on how to have better remote meetings. Now, the last thing we're going to cover today, before we'll take some Q&A at the end, is how to give better presentations online, how to communicate better online with a remote audience. Many of you are going to be giving your own presentations, that you're going to be having company meetings, you're going to be having company presentations, and a lot of them are going to be online, whether you want it to be or not. Right? A lot of people say, I just do face-to-face. Well, you're missing out on a huge opportunity if you're saying that, because with online, you can reach the whole world. So now I'm going to share with you 3 tools or 3 strategies on how you can give better pitches and presentations in a remote world. Before I do that, I forgot I put this slide in here. It's just to remember that you speak to people and not machines. People and not machines. And this goes back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier. It's about physical fatigue and cognitive load. Okay. If you were talking to a machine, you could be the most boring person in the world. You could be looking down at your notes. We could just be looking at your forehead. You could be talking like this, very, very boring tone. You could be poorly lit, and the machine would be happy because it got what it wanted. It just got a whole bunch of information. But you're not talking to a machine. You're talking to people. You're talking to clients. And they are very different in that they have physical fatigue and cognitive fatigue, right? Cognitive fatigue. I want you to visualize this. The moment you begin to give a presentation online, the moment you conduct a meeting online, the moment the other people jump on the camera, their brain start running on a treadmill, right? And the longer you speak, the more complicated it is for them to understand what you're saying, the more complex the material that you're presenting to them, the more poorly your visual slides are, the more poorly your whole presentation is, the quicker their brain is going to get tired, and the quicker their brain is going to shut off and say, I'm not listening. And as I said earlier, your presentation or your talk becomes moot. They're no longer going to be mentally present. They may be looking at the screen, but their brain is checked out. The second thing is, as I said earlier, they're going to be physically exhausted, right? Imagine that you're sitting there all day, 6-7 hours, right? You're hunched over a computer, you're typing away, your back is going to start to hurt, right? Let's say it starts to hurt. What happens when your back starts to hurt? The first thing that you do is you turn your focus away from whatever you're doing and you try to get rid of that pain, right? You turn your focus to alleviating the pain. And that's what the people who are listening to are going to do if you're just going on and on and on. Their body may be getting to hurt. They're getting physically tired. They're no longer going to listen to you. Okay. So here are 3 ways to ensure that you keep your audience's attention, your team's attention remotely. And the first way is just simply to stand when you present, stand when you communicate, right? Most people, when they speak and present, most meetings are actually done with just someone sitting in front of a camera. And if they're not a dynamic communicator, if you're not a dynamic communicator, or if you have very dry material that you're trying to get across, right? It's just very difficult to listen and watch somebody like this for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, right? But by standing, by using movement, using physical space, you start to use a little bit more body language. You start to use a little bit more of the tools that you naturally use in a face-to-face environment in this new remote environment. And you're much more likely to keep the audience's attention, right? So I'd really challenge you to do that. The next thing I would challenge you to do is to simplify what you're trying to say. Simplify your message, simplify your presentation. Okay, because I want you to realize that you are essentially competing with YouTube, with Instagram, with social media, with short bits of information that people are used to consuming. They're not used to consuming lots and lots of information, heavy information. They spend 80% of their free time, let's say, looking at YouTube, watching news, just very simple messaging. But then at work, if you start using really complex stuff, it's not going to jive with how they just are normally getting accustomed to taking information, right? They want entertaining, they want educational, they want useful. And so simplifying is just a very important way that you can keep in your mind to give your messages. So for example, if you're going to give a presentation that's running 30 minutes, what do I mean by simplify? I mean, reduce the length of it by 10 minutes, right? See if you can reduce it by 10 minutes. Ask yourself, what can I cut out that doesn't further what I'm trying to get across? That's just a very simple way to simplify. Second, if you have really complex information that you're trying to get across, I would challenge you to simplify the way you present that information so that the listener is better able to understand it. And you can simplify it by using more visuals and less verbal messaging, right? Put more visuals using good slides than verbal messages. So that's the second strategy. And the last strategy is just simply to practice. Practice as much as you possibly can. Take your cell phone, put it up in front of you, and just record yourself giving 90-second, 2-minute presentations and pitches and that. And you become very accustomed to shortening your messages, making them into sound bites, making them into something more consumable by your listener. And you'll be much more adept in condensing information so that they can better understand what you're trying to say. So I would just challenge you to practice as often as you can. So that's essentially all the information that I wanted to share with you today. I didn't want to take up the full 60 minutes because, like I said, we try to condense. This PowerPoint will be available to all of you who joined us today, so you can kind of digest it and use the slides as a checklist going forward. I know I did present a lot of information to you, but it's really, what I wanted you to have was those slides to serve as checklists to use at your work or in your life so that you are much more effective working in this new hybrid world. If you'd like more information about this kind of stuff, feel free to contact me at the information here at my website or my email address. And I conduct courses and trainings on virtual communication as well as well-being. So at this point, I will take some Q&A and feel free to chat anything that you'd like to get across, or perhaps you could list something that you walked away with. Could you please tell us something about the 5 generations workplace? Thank you, John. Well, Massimo, unfortunately, I can't tell you about that. That's not my area of expertise in terms of the generational. That would be someone else. I don't want to give you false information that I'm not too familiar with, right? Other than the fact that you're right, you do have to adjust your messaging and your communication style to how your particular audience that you're speaking to, or the employees that you're speaking to, absorb information. Let's see. Wouldn't people, Annie Bucci has a question. She goes, wouldn't people be distracted while walking around while listening to a meeting training? Well, if you're the person who's sitting in on the presentation during the training, right? I would challenge you you can turn off your camera, you can still be in the training and you can still watch and absorb. I'm not saying that you as the speaker or the presenter or the person conducting the training is walking around, but you can be the person who's sitting in on it, doing the movement. At the very least, if you feel that that might be distracting or uncomfortable, I would challenge you to stand up and just kind of move around, right? If you need to a little bit, just not sit there for the entire time, because during a training and during a presentation, that is a great time to get some physical activity where you don't necessarily need to be engaged in too much typing or anything along those lines. So the next question is how to motivate people to interact in online meetings. All right. So this is a webinar, right? Generally, you're going to have an online meeting with lots of people on your screen, maybe 8, 10 people. I would really challenge you to use the tools. For example, I'm going to talk about Zoom, that Zoom offers, right? I'd say, okay, everybody, what did you do last night? What did you do over the weekend? Everyone type something in the chat, right? And then they would then proceed to write something in the chat. Or then you'd say, okay, what I'd like for you to do is to use the emoticon, all right? So after I present the next piece of information, did you like it? Did you not like it? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Please use an emoticon. And you can tell them where the emoticons are at the bottom of the screen. Just try to use the engagement tools that are built into Zoom. Many people aren't going to have their cameras on and they may not want to interact. They may be very introverted, but if you use a chat box, it's essentially their way to express to you, right? Their way to be able to communicate. That's just a powerful way to engage people. Emoticons, chat, Zoom also has an annotation function where you can put PowerPoint slides in and everybody who's participating can annotate on that slide. You can also use polls. Just use the tools that the online communication platform has to engage people, especially when you can see everybody. Another thing I would challenge you to do is if you need everyone to participate, ask them at the beginning to turn on their screens and then call on them by name to answer, or call on them to answer a question, or if they want to get them input. A lot of people may be a little bit more reserved. They may not stand up, right? But if you call on them, use their name, you're going to much more likely to pull them in and get them engaged. Yes, Masibo, it's called Slideology. It's by a woman by the name of Nancy Duarte. And they have really fantastic information. And he's going, is there any research on how long a webinar should last to be more effective? Not that I'm aware of. I'm sorry, Annie, I don't have an answer to that about the research. If you know, anecdotally, from what I remember hearing is about 30 to 35 minutes. That's usually people's attention span. Beyond that, people start fading, right? And oftentimes you'll have people say, well, I have 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour webinars. It's a little bit much. What I would challenge you to do, if you have a lot of information that you have to present, is to put in what we call bio breaks or intentional breaks, and put them in every 30 to 45 minutes and give people 5 to 10 minutes. What some people do is they just go on and on and on. They don't give people those breaks. People are going to lose their attention. Putting in the breaks is just a very simple way to ensure that they'll stay engaged for all the information that you have. You'll also come across phenomenally, because people say, you could always frame it such that I care about your well-being, I care about your wellness. So it's very important that we all kind of take a 10-minute break here to step away. I want you to turn off your cameras, walk around, and then come back just for your health. And I think especially during these times, right, people are so hyper aware about their well-being and the importance of taking breaks that they'll really appreciate that. And that might actually enhance what you're trying to get across. Online meetings encourage people to do other stuff on the side. How to avoid that? It depends on the context of the online meeting, right? If you have this massive group of people, let's say 20, 30, 40 people, and people are doing things on the side, there's really not anything that I'm aware of that you can do to eliminate that. Now, if it's a smaller group, you have to question, okay, am I engaging or not, right? How engaging are you? And then the worst thing I've seen is for people to turn off the chat function. Sometimes people have done that, but they'll find other ways to do it. You're not going to keep everyone engaged at all times, but if you want to prevent them from doing those other things, try to engage them directly while you are presenting as the speaker, as the meeting facilitator, by using the chat box, by using the emoticons, right? You might even call it out at the beginning, say, all right, this meeting is very important. I know some people have offline messages. I would just ask for the next 10 minutes that we just focus on this. And then after that, I understand that you may want to go back to that. But for these 10 minutes, I just really need your attention. We sometimes have meetings 9 to 5 and breaks after 90 minutes. I'm completely exhausted in the evenings. Oh, absolutely, NT. It's exhausting because you're not meant to sit there for so long. Your body can't handle it. And maybe it's I don't know if you're the person who's conducting the meetings or running the meetings, or your bosses are, but they may not know the physical fatigue that all this stuff is causing. It's because they're just unaware. So you might share with them perhaps the slide that I shared with you, and just show, these are some tools that we can so we can have better meetings, right? And just frame it not around you're killing us, you're exhausting us. Here are some ways that we can make our meetings much more effective. Right. Excellent. Any more questions? Thank you very much, Annie, for that. I wish the camera was live so we could see everybody. But thank you very much. Unless there's anything else, we will close down today's webinar. And then the PowerPoint will be available. I'm sure we'll be able to get that to you. And yeah, if you have any questions or anything, you want to reach out to me, I'll put my email in the chat, as well as my website. And I'd welcome connecting and chatting and helping if you need it. Thank you very much, Lena. I'm glad it was interesting. I'm glad. It's a strange topic if you think about it. Oftentimes we don't connect physical well-being with workplace effectiveness, but it's actually the fundamental foundation of workplace effectiveness. Because if you have no body, if you have no mental function, you can't do everything else. You take care of that, everything else becomes much easier, right? Oh, let me try putting this back in. You can't see my messages. There. Did that show up? Let's try this. Great. See, everyone got engaged. All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much. I wish you well wherever you are in the world. I look forward to connecting you in ASW, and I look to hopefully one day meet all of you. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to call it an evening, and take care. Bye-bye.